fiction comes against you, every time the government comes against you, or the IRS, or any public institution in that sense comes against you, seeking to penalize you or incarcerate you, or worse, lethally inject you. Essentially, the critical element from Brandon's perspective is to move back on the front foot in respect of the securities frauds that are being perpetrated against you in the first place by the fiction. Brandon, can you just extrapolate a little bit on that?
Yeah. So if you look at your credit card bills and everything, they have the public corporation name on it, right? So, and then you start looking up a lot of the different definitions and stuff, and you have the definition of the word bank, and it means basically any person who involves himself in the business of banking. And then every time you use your credit card, you're promising to pay whatever transaction that you have, and you're signing it either digitally or manually, depending on if you're going to a restaurant or whatnot. So every time you use your credit card, you're actually producing securities. You're producing promises to pay. Yeah. And those promises to pay, because the all caps name, the public corporation is manufacturing these securities, by definition, as per the definitions from even the Bill of Exchange Act or wherever you're going to find it, the public corporation, when it's creating securities, is acting as a bank. So that would make you a banker. So you are the one who signs, you're the agent on behalf of the principal. You sign on behalf of the public corporation to manufacture that currency, right? So you're a banker and you have a bank, okay? And your bank is part of the Federal Reserve System. And that's basically how it works. That's what ties you into the system, right? And you can basically, if you look at the Federal Reserve Act, Section 16, called Note Issues, Part 2, they say right in there that basically if I sign a promise to pay, and I have it right here, let's say I swiped a credit card and I promised to pay for a steak dinner. I can take this security that I just produced and I can write up an exchange order or exchange request, but it's pretty much an order because it says in Section 2 that they'll always approve it. There is no disapproval process. You can actually send in your manufactured securities in order to exchange them for Federal Reserve notes. And what's happening is that every month when you get your statement at the end of the month, you call it a bill. But if you look at the Bill of Exchange Act from 1882, it says very clearly bill means bill of exchange. So you've never once in your entire life received a bill. Your entire life you received bills of exchange, which is an entirely different term. If you look at the definitions of the various words, you'll realize that the basic, most ground floor definition of the word check means order. Now, that order normally has, and I have some checks here, that order normally has various things on it. It normally has a date on the upper right, who it's going to or coming from is on the upper left, and then pay to the order of, which is actually a legal term. That's why the checks say that. By the way, there's all sorts of tricks you can do with checks. Like, for example, pay to the order of, you can write the word bearer in there, and now anyone can cash the check. I mean, I don't know why you want to do that, but it's just an interesting, it actually becomes cash at that point. You can actually change a check into cash by writing the word bearer under pay to the order of. So you basically just transformed the check into a promissory note, and legally that promissory note has the exact same value in law as any Federal Reserve note, because you wrote the word bearer on it. So that makes it what's called negotiable, which means easy to exchange. Non-negotiable is when you write in someone's actual name in the pay to the order of box, right? But basically, a check is just an order, and then it's signed or released. When you sign or release it, it's called an endorsement. An endorsement is the way that you release a security or an instrument. So when you learn all this and you look at the Bill of Exchange Act, you realize that you can actually take those bills of exchange that you're getting in the mail every month with all your securities on it, and you can write orders on the face of the Bill of Exchange, and you can mail it back, and it's actually legally a check. And you're saying, take The positive value, which by the way, all your bills of exchange are always in a positive value, no different than your bank account. Probably never noticed that. It's not negative. You can actually take the positive value of all those securities and you can actually have them all exchanged for Federal Reserve notes and then applied to the account. Now you got to keep in mind, in order for there to be a contract, there has to be equal consideration, right? But there's another part of it that's very fascinating, which I'm learning about more now because I'm about ready to sue American Express for a lot of money. There's interest on the account, and people always think that you're paying the interest at the banks. That's not the truth. The truth is that these securities that you're producing throughout the month, when you deposit them into your deposit account, which is your credit card statement, your credit card account, they're producing interest. So what I'm going to be doing in my lawsuit is I'm going to say, I'm going to give you guys, American Express, limited liability to actually endorse these bills of exchange on my behalf. And in exchange, I'm going to give you all the interest on the account. Now, so now we have a legal contract where we have equal consideration. And also what that does is it legally justifies me forcing them to remove all credit limits from the account.
Very good.
Because there'd be no point to have a credit limit because I as a beneficiary, like Sean was saying, there's no reason to cap me. And then on their end, I've offered them equal consideration for a sliding scale all the way up to infinite numbers, that the more I spend, the more I'm willing to pay them because the interest will accrue more on the securities that are produced.
Very good. What's your bet at the outcome?
Oh, 1,000%. I don't even think it's going to go to trial. I think they're going to settle it before trial.
Okay. It'd be very, very problematic for them to take it to trial.
Oh yeah. They don't, I mean, it's, I know this thing front and back. I've sent them many, many, many communications. I've sent them legal forms, requests, claims. The California Attorney General witnessed a few of the documents. The United States Attorney General witnessed a few of the documents. I got evidence out the wazoo. This has been going down for years. This is like this is probably like 2 years in the making, a year and a half.
Sean, what do you reckon? Amex with no credit limit.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's black card, right? I mean, but the interesting question is how much credit can they extend themselves, right? Because they have to get it from the Federal Reserve, essentially. I mean, they must have their own limitations in terms of what they can create.
No, there's no limitations.
I wouldn't have thought so, yeah.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And they're not getting any instructions or limitations from the Federal Reserve. You are the only one who can issue those limitations.
Mm-hmm.
It's your credit. It's not the Federal Reserve's credit. The Federal Reserve is just swapping out the credit you're manufacturing for their own versions of credit, which is the Federal Reserve note.
Right. But there's still some hypothetical as far as the accounting. But again, I mean, I don't know. I think what's cool is that you're doing a law, like a Williams & Williams, right? Law firm or something. I mean, not a law firm, like you're basically attorney in fact, not at law, but attorney in fact. So
that's right.
Are you going to be giving advice to other people in terms of their process and being able to like be hired for legal advice, or how would you describe it? Lawful advice?
Yeah, because I'm not located in any of the corporate states, and I'm not located in the United States, which I'm very clear about on my forms and on my invoices and on my website. I'm a national, and I'm a national of the nation of the Amnesty Coalition. So I operate outside the system entirely, and then I operate inside the system using the public corporation.
And at what point would you expect a SWAT team to descend from a black helicopter?
I don't know if they wanted maybe some beers and they wanted to hang out. I don't know. I don't have any consideration about that because, like I was saying to everyone in Malibu, personally, I think the most important part of all this is 18 USC 11, which is the definition of the term foreign government. The definition says that any person, any body of insurgents anywhere, a part of any country that is at peace with the United States is considered and classified as a foreign government, despite it does not need any official recognition by the United States to be legally classified as a foreign government. So you don't need any approval. You don't need to fill out any forms. You don't need to request anything. You don't need to do anything. All you have to do is just be at peace and be a national and have all your paperwork and all your naturalization paperwork and everything and all your stuff all straightened out. And at that point, you are legally a foreign government.
Right. I mean, I get that, and I think it's beautiful. But my concern, being born in sub-Saharan Africa, growing up in the third world, so to speak, and spending most of my adult life hitherto living between the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeast Asia, and now in Central America, Mexico. I know firsthand. Recently, I was in Sudan, and a country like Sudan, Burkina Faso. There are a number, I could name 50 countries right now that if I were to meet with a costume along the path, and if I were to try to cite Geneva Human Rights Convention or UCC, I'd still get a bullet in the head. And that's the problem, I think, is where the rubber hits the road in many parts of the world. Do you see that? I mean, how would you deal? I know how you deal with something on a street in Florida or in California. I get it. And I know with what elegance you'd be able to commandeer that scenario, because at the end of the day, the cops can't just pull a gun out and shoot you in the head. But there are many parts of the world where they can and would. So do you see that as being problematic, that most of the world are not able to really uptake on the sovereignty issue in the same way that you can possibly the United States, or let's say in the Western world?
No, because it just comes down to the trustee beneficiary relationship again. Like, for example, let's say I was abducted by a gang in one of these countries. Well, almost every country operates off of the UCC. So the thing is that you could offer to give that particular gang infinite money, for example. And how would any gang or any individual truly hate a person who was offering to give them infinite money? I mean, it's, almost every country, any country that operates under the UCC is a country where you could set up an infinite money situation. So the thing is that if you have something to benefit everyone, including the police, including the judges, including the bankers, including everybody, I mean, really, truly, at the end of the day, there are very, very few people on this planet that are my enemy. Very, 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 very few people I haven't even met.
Very good. Sean, what's your understanding of the distinction between a sovereign, a citizen, and a state national or a national?
Well, I think, there's no sovereign citizen. You can't be a sovereign if you're a citizen. Right. So it's like, and the state national, you can be a state national, you can be a national, American national. I mean, it's funny because you go to your E-Verify once you do submit for your passport or whatnot with the right, documents and oaths and things like this. And you can actually check, and it's like, it gives you an option in E-Verify, which is the DHS run. It says non-citizen national is one of the options they give you. So it's not like, we're making this up here. But I think just towards your point, Sasha, I mean, there have been people killed. We can't, kid around the fact that there's layers and layers to how the world is run, right? And the black helicopter stuff and like the deep state stuff and the secret space program elements. I mean, they have technologies going back to when this they were showing back in the 70s, the CIA has the heart attack gun, but like they've got all kinds of, rays and death rays and gun things that they can hit you, lasers they can hit you with. I know you've experienced that with your body, getting affected. You've shown the effects of that, but that's the kind of stuff that can be done. And there are people, even with that whole Nevada situation, the Bundy situation, there was one guy that was killed by FBI. They just basically just took him out right there, and it was amazing. I mean, I think they even recorded it and just shot him in the head. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that does go on. And so, like you said, you can't get shot in the street. Yeah, we know people get shot in the street in America by cops. I mean, we've seen it with we see it more prevalently when black people.
But there's recourse. There is recourse. Yeah, but there's recourse. It goes to trial. The cop goes to prison. That doesn't happen. If the media knows about it. Remember with the Bundy thing, I remember that was like,
I don't remember the government getting, getting any reprimand for what they did with the Bundy. So to your point, there are layers and levels to this that we have to, that's why I go back to the spiritual side. You have to be spiritually prepared and at peace, because you just don't know where someone will try to take you out if you cross the wrong person and or the wrong, or whatever, you become something, a thorn in the side of a system. We've seen obviously presidents get killed, right? We've seen MLK, Malcolm X, and others. I mean, there's like, these things do occur. So it's just, to me, it's a spiritual thing. It's like, I believe as a soul, and I always say this to people, you cannot be taken out of the game, because this is a matrix, right? And the same way that when Brandon's talking about the matrix of like, there's the commercial side that you can go into to operate like in the matrix, right? And then there's the private, and then there's the spiritual side. You can't just be taken out because someone doesn't like you. Your soul has to agree. There's still contracts on the spiritual side, right? So I look at the whole thing like, we talk about aliens and other, some of your shows. I look at space as maritime law. That's why they've been using it on this planet. It's an extension of galactic laws.
Beautiful. And bringing that subject up, Brandon, I'm keen to know your thoughts. I've been lecturing for over probably close to 15 years on my own understanding of sovereignty, my own understanding of the micronation. I set up a micronation in 2014 when I launched the New Earth Nation. We established a constitution and it's effectively launched a micronation. Now, we would technically need to do a whole bunch of different things, I think, to be able to fully qualify, but I will go with that initiative, which
Probably Canada, probably Belgium. We don't know yet.
You and your straw man are actually partners in your law firm, more or less, correct?
Yeah.
That's terrific. So friends, there you have it. I mean, check the links below. And the other onesmallfuck.com, what exactly does that, what does that provide?
So One Stupid Fuck is the free, hilarious, educational, just, that's the baseline spinal cord platform brand, however you want to say it. And it kind of goes back to what you guys were talking about earlier. It's a, I feel like in this movement, I feel like the fastest and easiest way to fix a lot of the issues that you see in a lot of these freedom movements and spiritual movements is to think upon the experiencing of fear as something natural, but the sharing of fear as cardinal sin.
I like that. Very good. Terrific distinction. Can you tell us a little bit about trusts and legal loopholes, and what is a non-revocable trust or irrevocable trust, and how can Joe Public participate in that esoteric game to advantage?
A trust are the only thing that are not issued by the government. They do issue business trusts, but it's just their version of trickery. A real true trust is pre-government. It's a pre-government option, meaning it existed before the government existed. So by using private irrevocable trusts and structuring them outside of the United States, which they actually tell you in the United States Code how to do it. It's very simple. It comes from 28 USC 1746. It tells you exactly how to sign the trust in order to make it outside of the United States. It literally says on there, if signed out without the United States, then you declare under penalty of perjury of the United States of America, which is dead to rights proof that we have two different countries here. We have United States, and then we have United States of America. And that's the evidence is right there in 28 USC 1746. And as far as I can tell, 28 USC 1746 comes directly from the slaughterhouse cases. The slaughterhouse cases was a Supreme Court case in 1873, right after the 14th Amendment was ratified, or supposedly ratified. And in the slaughterhouse cases is where they actually tore this whole federal U.S. citizen versus national versus state citizen versus who has rights versus privileges versus, and they just tore it apart in the slaughterhouse cases. And then after the slaughterhouse cases is what truly finalized and established the fact that there's the federal United States citizen, which is actually what the slaves became, because they didn't want the slaves to have the full rights of the state citizens. So they actually manufactured the U.S. citizen federal. It's basically a federal officer or employee, essentially, of the government, is essentially what the new classification was. And they said, we're not going to make the slaves full state citizens. We're going to make them kind of like quarter citizens or 10th citizens. And that was the U.S. citizen designation. And then the slaughterhouse cases was what really cleaned this up and made it very clear. And then after that, you have I think it's called the Incorporation Declaration, something like that, where what they did is they reincorporated only some of the original rights into the U.S. citizen category. There were many of the original rights that were not fully incorporated or were only partially incorporated. Now, none of this applies to state citizens. So anyone listening to this who a national and a state citizen is the same term. State citizen is a much older term. Nowadays in the United States Code, you will not see that term at all. You'll see only the term national. So we say state national, American national, but really in the United States Code, it's just national.
Okay. Sean, what's your understanding of how popular this is as a pathology? I mean, are you meeting people, speaking to people who have begun process, have engaged process? And can you even guess at a percentile? I mean, is it 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000? What do you imagine? There's 300+ million people in the United States. How many would you imagine have already declared themselves as nationals?
I think Brandon knows the numbers better than I do. Right? What have you heard?
It's blown up so much over the past few years that I don't really have any accurate numbers, but it's a lot of freaking people, I will say.
Is it in the tens of thousands?
It's
way beyond that. It's in the
for
millions
sure,
now.
for sure.
It's in the millions now. Yeah.
Because once you get TikTok channels and Instagram channels, and especially on TikTok a lot, starting to talk about these things, right? It shifts the whole nature of awareness and consciousness and discourse. So even if people are not necessarily pursuing it, the awareness, I think, has grown tremendously. You're talking millions of people now get it. And going back to, by the way, the trust, the birth certificate. So my understanding actually is that actually does create a trust. So government doesn't call it a trust, but your ALCAP's name is a trust in the sense that your parents grant you that name and with the title, the title, which is the certificate of birth. But rather than you being the beneficiary and the government being the trustee, which is the way it's supposed to be, they invert it and they make themselves the beneficiary and you the trustee of that name. And that is how they enslave everyone. So it's just a flip. Basically, they turn the pyramid upside down. And I should say they keep the pyramid where it's like the elite run it and you pay for it. But essentially they flipped what should have been your certificate of birth, was basically saying you are the beneficiary. You are the secured party creditor when you're born, because you're coming to this world with credit, which is to say you're coming with energy, with creativity, right? You're here to bring your credit to the world. And yet you're inheriting a percentile of the commonwealth, so to speak, at the time of your birth. That's my understanding of the birth bond scenario. If there's 100 people in a given country or 99 people in a given country on the day you're born, you become the 100th citizen, you inherit 1% of the commonwealth. That becomes the value essentially of your trust, and then that is handed over to the government because you're an infant and you're infantile and your parents were stupid enough to sign you over to the state. And at that point on, all the credit cards, debts, and all the rest of it is stuff that gets discharged against your birth bond or treasury bond. Is that, in a reductive sense, Brandon, more or less how it works?
I mean, you're creating security, so it's gotten more and more muddied over the years. I mean, I think maybe 100 years ago the answer to that question would be yes, but now it's more of a no, because there is no money. There's only securities. You're producing the securities all the time, and then you're basically not realizing it, but you're essentially abandoning those securities and the financial institutions just pick up the abandoned securities. That's what's happening every single month. Every single month when you pay your bills with Federal Reserve notes, they look at it as you failed to perform, you abandoned the securities, and then they take them and clean up the account on your behalf because you're a child or a retard, basically. Yeah.
Wow. I've just learned, Sean, that I've been teaching people for years a curriculum that's about from 1923.
Well, you don't want to.
That's going to get me into a heap of shit, Brandon. Thank you.
Funny. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Sean, just weighing in with a bit of your kind of esoteric understanding of the Matrix and the life and times of Homo sapien. What's your understanding of the beast of the sea and the beast of the land as it relates to pre-Phoenician and the status quo today?
I don't know in terms of like, identifying what is 666, right? And what does the beast really mean? Is the mark of the beast the social security number, or is it the birth certificate? Is it is it the microchip? I mean, I don't know, like, in terms of that. Maybe Brandon has more of a perspective on it. But I know that the beast system is, I would say, it's like, what's curious to me is this. I look at it like, what Christ, if you look at Jesus as the name Je suis, like the I am, right? It's like the I am, is Christ is kind of teaching us to walk on land, to become sovereign. I really think one of the esoteric interpretations, and of course you can look at the Bible I think you have to look at the Bible through multiple interpretations. There's astrological interpretations, right? There's obviously spiritual truth, there's moral truth. But if you think about it, he's fishing men from the sea. He's a fisher of men. What are men? They're lost at sea, right? He's teaching them to walk on land and even to be able to walk on water, right? Which is to say, I'm no longer subject to maritime law. But when, but when he passes, what does the Roman Empire do, right? Whether they created that version of Jesus or whatever, the text, the New Testament, right? They basically assemble that and they then say, okay, well, Christ is not here. So we claim dominion to all souls, as the Pope at one point said in a papal bull, right? We lay claim to all souls. We lay claim to the kingdom of heaven and earth, right? We have both air and land. And so to me, it's like this time period is very much about man reclaiming the land, right? Which is what Earth is. Like, there's a reason we call it Earth, even though it's a water planet. But essentially, it's like psychologically, we're getting out of that maritime modality of everyone being lost and just trafficked in commerce, basically lost souls, to the place of, no, we're standing on land as the living kings and queens, because we're no longer in the Piscean age of the fish. Now we're carrying the water. We're able to bear the water, so we can operate in commerce. That water is commerce, right? We can bear that. We can bear our name. We can operate in commerce, but we're walking on land. Ultimately, I believe we're going to ascend in a spiritual manner, and that's the destiny of where humans are going. Basically, like the angels, we get our wings. That's where we're moving toward, is the air. Because then when you have the air, then you're really the bearer of bonds. That's why they got the eagle, like the Roman Jupiter, all these, man, they're the ones that bring the bonds and scoop you up, right? So you want to ultimately be there.
Well, beautifully stated. And that is why I love you, Sean. And that is why I allow you to bear my surname.
Got it. When you die, you will no longer own any particle of anything you have ever associated yourself with. So ownership itself on the spiritual side is nothing more than an ability to perceive or commandeer some sort of object or thing. So what's funny is that the psychosis associated with ownership, like, for example, what Sean had mentioned about the ownership of spirits, or the ownership of this, it stems from a lack of control and a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self, what would you call it? A competence that would cause a person to believe that they need to have some sort of additional control above and beyond what would be possible for a human being to have, which the only true ownership that a person can have, it would be to have and to perceive and to commandeer. You could say to yourself, ownership would be defined as the ability to control the commandeering of something. So, for example, your car, you don't have anybody can just come and just take your car. You know that it's there, and you give people the right to commandeer that particular thing. But I think that flies up into trust law a lot. I think trust law teaches us so much because who truly owns everything? It's God, it's the earth, it's the air, it's the that's where all the gods are of earth, of water, of wind. Because where does that car go eventually? No matter how well you take care of it, where does that car eventually go? It goes to the ground, it goes to the air, it goes to the wherever it's going to go, and it's not going to be yours, and it won't be yours, and it never really was yours in the idea of ownership that we think it is through our indoctrination that we've had here on this planet. So all forms of excessive, quote, desire or frantic desire to own would be by definition like almost like a psychosis. Now, this goes a lot into relationships. That's probably one of the areas that you see the most of this, and you see it destroy the most lives and people murdering each other, is this idea of this frantic, selfish, unconfident, incapable desire to go above and beyond the freedom that another person may have associated with their own perception and their own commandeering of their own life. And I think that it's a fascinating subject, and I think it's a subject that would clean a lot of this up, because it really comes down to the fact that if there are people trying to control our souls, that's a physical impossibility. That's nothing more than just a completely manufactured psychosis. It's impossible. It can't be possible. And actually, even beyond that, you can't truly commandeer or control anything in this world. And you can look at that from a very, very positive light, like, hey, that's great, I'm okay with it. Or you could look at it in a negative light. But there's an aspect of it that it is beautiful, because beauty can only exist knowing that that thing will disappear or can disappear. Beauty cannot exist in something that exists forever. It's almost as if the world was designed to disappear, because that's the only way beauty could be introduced.
So I like that, but I don't think I understand it. So you're saying that if beauty was an infinite measure, it would be classified as ineffable, for instance.
Yeah, beauty can only exist in a world where beauty degrades or disappears. Time is almost the creator of beauty itself, if you think about it.
It's like Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn. Essentially, it's I mean, the whole point of why is this universe created? It is created by a creator, a spiritual power greater than we can conceive, for the purpose of separation, to better appreciate itself, right? And we're all part of that. But towards your point about control, it can't be done at a physical level, although that's the psychosis that so many of these people are under when they're trying to, gobble up all the resources of the planet within a few interlocking corporations and all the wealth and all the control of populations. But there's also a spiritual component, I believe. And I mean, Sasha, we've talked about my series, The Best Kept Secret, really gets into the manufacturing and manipulation of control, how it's broadcast through media. That's how you get, half the planet to like blindly go, I don't know what's in that shot, stick it in my arm, put on a mask, stay away from me, whatever the media tells you. I mean, it's that kind of control that's been projected, but I think it comes from a darker spiritual hierarchy, you could call demonic, that is actually interested in feeding on the human soul. And that is why they talk. I mean, that's why it's even talked about, how do you, what is the point? Physically, I can't control your soul, but there are things that are invisible to the sight that are very interested in the human soul, and basically are very afraid of our ascension, because as we ascend, we reclaim our soul. We take our ownership of our soul, which is our intuition, which is us to say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense anymore. And that's what the Great Awakening that we're living through is about. People saying, hey, this doesn't add up. And that's your soul, not your rational mind can be completely dissociated, confused, schizophrenic. There's a fact that, the fact checker said this, but this is what I'm saying. Trust your intuition. That's what the sovereignty movement's about. Come back to the here and now of your intuition, knowing that you don't need your, everything to add up in your logical, scaling of things. There is still something higher as far as, the spiritual level of the spiritual domain of consciousness that we tap into to say, that's why I can see through the deceptions and lies, even though they may be come from honeyed lips and tongues, right? And they may sound so sweet and make me feel so good. and make me want to say, yeah, I want everyone to just get along and give up your guns. Let's all just be peaceful and let's just all live as one world. Let's all hold hands. But guess what? There are some very dark beings that, you know, that just feed on your naivete and your ignorance when you think that that's just the solution to everything.
Right. Beautifully said. And also the essence of the evil that we're dealing with and moving into the abundance again. So what's your take?
You know, which school of thought, human being, and that always made into actually value with tech turns it, you know, trying to basically lay claim is you want to be able to sail your vessel. Current economy can, you'll sell us your goods. And promissory note, we're giving you credit for it, but guess what we're going to do? How about a system like this? When we take your promissory note and trade it, right, or sell it, we're going to give you your interest. How about that for a model, right? Where you actually make money on your promissory note, right? That'd be a more harmonious model. Or, you know, I don't even know if these big banks will be in the picture on the going forward. But my point is the idea of everyone being able to actually profit, right? When you go to a Facebook or an Instagram and you realize those companies are valued at billions of dollars, and yet the billions of dollars that they're valued at are actually you who's on that platform, using it, interacting with it, creating from it. You should have a stake in that. You should be earning profit from that. You should be part of that valuation system. And that's been our problem as a planet, is that we basically have a few people feeling like they need more and more of the wealth, right, at the expense of everyone else. And it's like there's no need for that. We can all participate in a real capitalist economy where actually the creator and the producer and the consumer are all invested and staked in that. Now that, I mean, that's really why people love capitalism, right? Because we feel like, hey, it's a system where you can invest your money freely, you can choose where to partake. But we've seen now how it's been corrupted and corroded by, again, a scamming central banking system, inflating money, devaluing your dollar, you know, so that your dollar in 1920 could have bought you a whole meal, and now a dollar, you know, good luck, I don't know what it'll buy you. I mean, that's the point, right? If we actually had an honest system, a dollar now should give you more value than in 1920. And right. That's, I think, where we're going to have to go.
Very good. Any system is going to be a good system, provided there's no longer any third-party intervention. So it all came down to the fucking Catholic Church, or the nefarious element of it, which has now pretty much taken over the entire basement. We're hearing directly from cardinals inside the College of Cardinals that they've gone to hell, that they're blood-drinking Satanists conducting bestial orgies in the papal crypts. So we know what's going on there. That piece of shite establishment is over. The same thing with Washington District of Columbia and the puppeteering that everyone can see now in Technicolor, the crowns of Europe, all of that stuff. It's okay, baby. It's over. You know, the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, arguably the last citadel still kind of teetering on its own hubris and fiction. But, you know, the critical thing here being a return to relationship between the fellowship of man, relationship between human beings, and the relationship between humans and the land and the creatures of the land. That is and has to be the new source code of the new prosperity economy. Brandon, what is your most reductive advice to people of the world listening in? You are hallowed as a great teacher in this. You're going to be increasingly so in the days ahead, unless that black helicopter does indeed unleash it's strange chaps in SWAT outfits. Please God, that doesn't happen to you. I think you're blessed and protected. But what is your most reductive advice to people of the world? Emphasis, parents who are about to register their infants.
Oh, on that subject specifically, I was going to go over a couple other things first, based off of what Sean was talking about and what you were talking about, and then we'll get into that as well. So for me, it's, you know, if you feel that you're at war, which I don't necessarily at all, really, but if you do, then the person I would direct you to would be Sun Tzu, and I would direct you to The Art of War, right? And there's a lot of things that he says that are so simple, they're hard to emotionally process. You know, like, for example, the greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Or he says things like victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first, then seek to win, right? If you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Very simple things. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity, which is a big one, right? That shifts a lot of these. You're shifting from fear to truth. There's nothing that Sun Tzu says that will produce fear in your mind. Everything Sun Tzu says will turn your fear into comfort. Sun Tzu is therapy that exchanges your fear for comfort and power. But there's a power, in my opinion, even above Sun Tzu, because Sun Tzu is only talking about when a person is at war. For example, one of my favorite, a couple quotes that he says is, all warfare is based on deception. So what that means is that if you are at war, or you feel like you are at war, or you assume that you are in some sort of a warfare or something like that, there must be some aspect of it which is not fully understood, because if you knew yourself and you knew your enemy, then there wouldn't be a problem, right? So my whole premise is, if you know your enemy so well, do you cease to be at war with that individual person? And at that point, you wouldn't be operating off of the art of war any longer, because there wouldn't be a war. So a knowledge of the enemy is the ultimate solution to war. It's a settling of all disputes, which is essentially what law is in its greatest essence anyways. I mean, even what is it? We have Sun Tzu, Golden Bridge is one of my favorite quotes. He says, let me see here. He says, I can't find it right now, but he says, give your opponent a golden bridge of which to retreat across. What does it say? Build your opponent a golden bridge to retreat across, right? So it's knowing your enemy, and then building that golden bridge, and then realizing that all chaos is opportunity, and understanding these things. And then if you are truly operating in honor, then this war is nothing more than a lack of ability to settle. Right. And then once you actually do settle, you have to actually acknowledge the fact that you are no longer involved in a war. It's very simple. If you're involved in a war, then you need to win the war before you start the war.
Right.
And you need to realize that all warfare is based off of deception. You need to build your golden bridges for people to retreat across. You need to do all these different things, or you can do all these different things, and you won't operate from the standpoint of fear any longer. You're going to operate from a very comfortable, I'm sure Sun Tzu was a very calm, uncombative individual in his most basic nature. He has to be, by the way he writes. There's absolutely no way. He was never screaming in the pulpit, so to speak. Never once. Right. I mean, the guy was probably pretty soft-spoken, actually. Very powerfully spoken, probably soft-spoken. So the thing is that, it's an acknowledgement. Are you at war? Are you not at war? If you are at war, then you are probably should be operating off of this particular, in my opinion, set of wisdom. And if not, then what are you operating off? If you aren't at war, then now where are you at? That's a whole nother subject, right? Yeah. And I kind of feel like with a lot of this stuff, the war is really just internal. I mean, the war is the idea that you are at risk, the idea that you are going to be harmed, and it's the idea of having to stop that of which is harming you. Yes. But ironically, in fact, what if you simply decided that those things don't really have much of anything to do with you? It's almost, it's very, very, illusion and delusion are a razor's edge from one another. And I think that's really where people get confused is what is the difference between an illusion and a delusion? And I think that's really where a lot of this whole conversation really could go into another hour, That's
beautiful. Well, I love it. That illusion versus delusion. I'm going to uptake you on that. I'm going to set that aside for the next conversation. Yeah. I love it, Brandon. Thank you. That's so beautiful. Whilst Sean was chugging nanoparticulates of plastic polymers from a large jug there, don't think I didn't see that, Sean. You can't drink water out of a plastic bottle, pal. It's not good for you.
I hear you. I hear you, but I'm traveling. So guess what? Until I get home to my nice filtered, everything filtered, I will drink my distilled. my
Very
distilled
good,
water.
very good. All right, well, winding up, I have to ask this question of you, Brandon, because I know that the answer from Sean would include Donny Osmond and Britney Spears. But for you, the question is, if you had the great banquet in the sky and you could invite to that banquet 2 or 3 guests,